All right, hello everyone. I'm super happy to be here. My name is John, and I'm an iOS developer at Spotify. And I also do a lot of open source projects, etc. in Swift that we heard a little bit about just before. So I'm here to tell you a little bit more about that and also talk about Swift and JSON in general. So Swift has been around now for about 2 years, and it's been really exciting 2 years as well. It's really taking the iOS and OS X development communities by storm. You know, in fact, these days you hear all about Swift all the time. And what people are saying in general is that they really like it. Everyone is always talking about how amazing it is and how it makes them more productive and write better code. And I couldn't agree more. I think Swift is an amazing language. And I mean, it's got a lot of amazing, cool characteristics about it. It's modern, it's more expressive, and it's more compile time safe. We kind of tend to write code that is less prone to runtime errors, which is great. However, as some developers have also noticed, is that when you deal with dynamic things, such as JSON, Swift can sometimes be a little bit cumbersome. Because of the nature of JSON, it can change at any point. We have to do a lot of checks and stuff up front using Swift that we didn't have to do in Objective-C. Or rather, we maybe should have done it in Objective-C, but the compiler didn't tell us about it. So let me give you some examples of how this really works. So let's say we have a very basic user structure in our app that we use to model the way our users look when we're using our app. They have a name and an age. Very simple. And we would get some data from our backend to turn into this kind of user structure that would look something like this. We would also have just a name and an age, very straightforward. Now let's take a look at what kind of code we would have to write in order to deal with this JSON, in order to decode this JSON into this user structure using only the standard library. We would have to write something like this. And this code, by the way, has been made an awful lot better compared to how it was with Swift 1, where we would have the if-let pyramid of doom, as some people refer to it. So now we have the guard statement, we have throwing functions, which makes things easier, but still there's a lot of code we have to write. We have to start by using NSJSON serialization to get an object from our NS data. Then we have to turn that into a dictionary and do some casting. We have to get the name and the age and do casting there as well. And finally, we're turning our data into a user instance. So this is quite a big method to do such a simple task. This is a very simple model, and all of the apps that you guys are building probably have a lot more complicated models than what I just showed you. So the problem is partly that we have to write a lot of code, but also that just this simple function here, it actually has 5 different exit points. So there are 5 different ways we can exit this method, which if you think about it means that if you were to unit test this function in a good way, you would have to write a minimum of 5 unit test cases. And again, very simple model. But the biggest problem as I see it with this approach is that this approach is not reusable. And this has kind of become a trend in all of my talks that I do. I always talk about reusable code because I'm a huge fan when I don't have to rewrite things over and over again. So in this case, I would have had to, because if I'm introducing a new model or if I'm changing my user model, I will have to rewrite this function or create a new one. So when I started learning Swift, like about 2 years ago now, I started writing code like this, and I realized that there needs to be a better way to do this. This can't be the best way. And I also thought that there needs to be some other people who've had similar problems, such as me, who've probably already solved them for me. And we heard before about managing dependencies and how you can actually pull them into your app very easily. So I thought, let's just do that. Let's go to the GitHub mobile and find some really cool project that I can just pull down and use so I don't have to write these long JSON parsing functions anymore. Now, it turns out that I was right, and this has become kind of a little bit of a joke in the iOS developer community lately, that there's a new Swift Cocoa pod every day. So there's always like new pods for parsing JSON every day. And yeah, that's kind of true, and there's a lot of them out there, and there's a lot of really good projects out there as well. But when I looked around, I didn't really find something that I truly liked, or something that was truly what I wanted to do. So let me show you some examples. The projects that were out there when I started looking either still required me to write a lot of boilerplate and still have multiple exit points from my function that I really wanted to avoid. Or some of them were using a lot of operator overloads, which really made it a little bit hard to reason about. I didn't really know what pipe, square bracket, question mark really means. And I know that some people in this room probably worked on this framework, so no offense, but this is just my opinion. And finally, some of them required me to use a lot of mutatable state, like they required my model to have optionals, because they would do the mapping after the object was created. So I couldn't have this clean models where everything was determined up front. I have to keep unwrapping these optionals every time I was using these models. So none of them really did what I really wanted to do, because what I wanted was really code that was easy to write, code that was easy to read, and also I wanted to keep my model code clean. So I didn't want a lot of throwables, I didn't want a lot of optionals, I didn't want a lot of custom assignments. I just wanted simple, easy to use, and easy to read code. So what I did was I started working on Unbox. And Unbox is yet another JSON library. Ta-da! But the most important characteristic of Unbox would be that it was the easy-to-use Swift JSON decoder. I didn't want to implement a lot of magic. I didn't want to implement super powerful features like lots of different amazing cool stuff. I just wanted a Swift JSON library that was easy to understand. So let's go back to our user structure that we had before, and let's see how we would go about implementing Unbox to unwrap our JSON into this structure. The first thing we need to do is conform to the unboxable protocol. And that will really just require us to implement one method. That's an initializer that looks like this. So we'll be given an unboxer, which is the kind of core class of how Unbox decodes your JSON. And on it, you're going to call unbox for each property that you want to decode. I'm going to try to not say unbox all the time, because it's both a verb and a noun and everything, right? So in this case here, we're saying unbox name and unbox age. And then unbox automatically figures out what types these properties are, if they're optional or required, and then decodes them accordingly and handles our errors for us as well. So that means that now, in order to write this, before we had to write this long function, but now we can just call unbox on our NS data, and we would either have an error thrown or get a user instance back. So it's very simple. Now, how does this all work? Well, it works thanks to Swift's really advanced type inference system. So we don't have to do a lot of things inside of the framework. The Swift compiler really does all the heavy lifting for us. It automatically figures out if it should use an optional or required method, which type it should return, etc. And this is also thanks to the fact that we can do method overloading now. Now, this wasn't possible in Objective-C, but now in Swift we can do it, which really enables us to create some very nice APIs. So if you take a look at the Unboxer class, like how the API really looks, it's really just a lot of overloads of this unbox method that returns different types. And these are all like the valid JSON types that you can expect. So the compiler will automatically figure out which method to dispatch to, and then in that method we can type check, we can make sure that things are the way they're supposed to, and we can throw any errors if something was wrong. And the same thing even works for optionals. So we can also create overloads that return optionals, and then Swift will automatically dispatch to those. So the cool thing about this is if we go back here to our user structure, the only thing we have to do if we want to make the age, for example, an optional piece of data, we just make it an optional property. And then Swift would automatically dispatch to the correct overload of the unbox method, and we will have the proper handling. So what about errors? Error handling is something you always have to do when you deal with data, especially data that's coming from a network. It's kind of a classic client developer saying that you should never trust your server. So it's kind of an inherently error-prone operation to decode JSON because your schema might be wrong, the backend might be sending malformed data, etc. But as you can see, we don't have any error handling code in here. There are no throws here, there's no failable initializers, there's no checks, etc. How does this really work? So the thing here is that since we're using a centralized object, in this case the unboxer, it can really take care of all this for us. Since we're using type inference and method overloading, we can make sure that the types are correct, that any required properties that we're missing gets an error, etc. And the unboxer will really hold all of the state so that our models don't have to. We can keep writing clean model code that only has assignments in it, and our models can really be what they were supposed to. Very, very thin, dumb data containers that don't have a lot of logic inside of them. So it becomes a lot simpler. Now, I've been talking about Unbox now for a little while, but rather than giving you a whole API overview, I would love to just show you a quick demo of how you can implement Unbox in your model code. So let's switch over. All right, can everyone see this? Nice. So here I am in a Swift playground, and what's pretty cool now is that it's very easy to add dependencies to a Swift playground these days. All you really have to do is drag in your libraries. In this case, I have Unbox here, and then you will get it automatically in the playground. You can just import it. You can also have resources in your playground. In this case, I've added 3 local JSON files that I'm going to use in this demo. So you can play around with data and with different APIs, even if they're third-party dependencies. So in this case here, you can see I have my user structure here, and I have the JSON there that I mentioned earlier in the slides, where I have the name and the age. Then what I do here on lines 15 to 17 is that I'm just loading this bundled JSON file, and then I'm doing the do try catch pattern here to try to unbox this NS data that my JSON file gives me, and then print out the user. And as you can see here now, we have a user where the name and the age matches the thing that is in the JSON file. So let's say we wanted to add some new piece of data here to our user. Let's say our backend developers, they implemented the fact that we can add a profession to our user so we can see what they're working with. So the way I could do this is I could either just have a string, but it wouldn't be very clean because I would have to keep static strings and compare it to them. It would be a lot simpler if I could use an enum. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to create a new profession enum here. And it's going to be of a string type. And I'm going to have a developer as the first case because we all know it's the best job in the world. And look there, the playground's crashed. And again. This will probably be a common theme throughout this demo here, but we'll see. Let's also say we can add a really boring profession here to our enum. Let's take lawyer. We really don't want that. So we can have a developer or lawyers. Those are our 2 types of users in our amazing app that we're building. So next order of business would be to add this data to my user model. So I'm going to do that. Profession, it's a profession. Now, normally, I would have to do a lot of code to decode this string that the backend is going to give me because the JSON file doesn't contain any information about my enum or anything like that. But with Unbox, what I can do is I can just add a conformance to unboxable enum, which requires me to implement one method, which is called unbox fallback value. What Unbox does is instead of sending you nil back if the unboxing failed, it will just use this dummy fallback value to kind of trick your model that this data existed, but then internally fail so that you won't get the model back at the end. So this enables you again to write simpler model code without having to deal with all of these things. So I'm going to return profession here, and let's just return lawyer because it should obviously be the fallback value, right? All right, so next order of business is to actually unbox this thing. So I will just do self profession equals unboxer unbox profession. And that's it. Unbox again, or Swift does actually, automatically figures out to dispatch to this particular overload of the unbox function, so I don't have to write any additional code. Now, it seems like the playground here has stopped, but let's see if we can run it. Let's see here. Yeah, that's the beauty of playgrounds, that they are so stable. Let's run here. There you go, perfect. So now you can see that since we added this new data, we're actually getting an unbox error here, missing key profession. And that's because I'm using the old JSON file that didn't have this piece of data. So I'm getting a very easy readable error here that I can handle very easily. In this case, the only thing I need to do is just to update the JSON file to B, which contains this data, run again, and boom, there you go. We now have a decoded user with a profession. So I didn't have to write any complicated parsing code of my enum. I just needed to add another assignment using Unbox. All right, final thing I wanted to add was that I want to add an array of devices. And in this case, it will actually be an array of nested models that will contain what kind of devices this user owns, and also which inch size they are. Hard to pronounce word. So let's go over here again, and let's do this. So I will first add a new structure. This will be called device, and it will also be unboxable. And it will have a name and an inch size. In this case, I'm going to use double, because the inch size can also be fractional, right? It can have 4.7 there, as you can see. That requires me to implement init with unboxer, and I will just assign self name to unboxer unbox name, and inch size to unboxer unbox inch size. There you go, perfect. So now we've made that happen. So we now have a device struct that conforms to unboxable. Next thing, we need to add it to our user. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's say devices, and that will be an array of device. And again, same thing here. I don't have to iterate over this array manually. I don't have to, write some kind of special parser for it. I just have to say self devices equals unboxer unbox devices. And there you go. And again, we have an overload that takes an array of nested models, so we can easily just have unbox do this for us. Again, you can see I get an error here. It says missing key device because I haven't updated my JSON file. So let's point it to C, and there we go. Now we don't have an error anymore, and we have a user that has devices. So that's just a very, very quick look at some of the things you can do. Automatic decoding of enums, automatic decoding of nested models, etc. I just wanted to show you one quick thing before I go back to the slides. Whoa, crazy tiling their windows. Now, wouldn't it be great if we also could not only go from models to JSON, or sorry, from JSON to models, but also from models to JSON? That would be nice, right? Turns out, I have a library for that too. And it's called wrap. Now what wrap does, it takes any Swift structure or class that you can think of, and you just call wrap on it, and you get JSON back. It's very, 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 very simple. So the way I would use it is here, that where I have my user instance, I can actually take this user and turn it into data. So let's say user data would be NS data, would be try wrap user. That's it. That's all I have to do. I don't have to implement some kind of serialization code or anything like that. It uses the Swift reflection API to determine all the types in your structure, and it automatically figures out which keys to save them as. And you can override this behavior if you want want to have a specific schema, but the default is just to use the property names. Very simple. So you can see here I get back a set of NS data. And just for fun, let's actually call unbox on it again to see that we get back the same thing. So let's say user2, for lack of imagination, try unbox user data, and let's make sure that it works. And there you go, we get a user back. So we can go back and forth. And it's actually a lot of fun implementing unit tests this way. You can be like, oh, encode, decode, encode, decode. Oh, it works. So that's a lot of fun. So that's a quick look at what you can do with unbox and wrap. So I just give you a quick look now, and there's a lot of things that both Unbox and wrap can do that I didn't touch on today, and a lot of them have actually been added by the community, so there has been a lot of external contributions to these frameworks, which I'm very, very happy for. So you can do stuff like automatically parse URLs, you can use custom keys, you can use transformations, you can do mappings between properties and keys, you can allow invalid elements in an array, etc. There's a lot of things, and if you start using these libraries and you find something that you would like to add, we'll be super happy to accept pull requests, because that's the way we grow these libraries together. So this was just a quick look. If you want to take more in-depth look or start to use these libraries, that would be really cool. I've created 2 short URLs here for you, so you can go to sundell.co/unbox or wrap, and I will take you to the GitHub page for these projects. Both of them are 100% open source, and as I said before, really happy to get pull requests and merge them in, so it's an actively developed project with the community. If you want to connect with me after this talk, I'm at John Sundell on Twitter. You can ask me any questions about these libraries or anything you want to talk about, really. Always happy to talk with fellow developers. And that's it. Thank you very much.